About the best candy bar, I think.
This is the one that we chose, and that's what we're rendering. So,
Good evening. Would you stand with me for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, please? Rod Smith, please.
Let us pray. Father, Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for watching over us, Father. We thank you for directing our paths, Lord. We pray to give us wisdom to path to follow, your path. I pray, Lord, that you protect those who volunteer here in our city. Pray that you protect the police force, Father. And also pray that you watch over the council members here, Lord, as they go about their business. Keep them safe, keep them healthy, Father. And those who are listening here today, I pray that you watch over them as well. We ask these things in your name, the name that one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that you are Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
Councilman Mancuso, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular session of the Vienna City Council for October the 27th, 2022. Let the record reflect that I've taken a roll that all members of council, with the exception of Mr. Leach, are present. Having a quorum, we will proceed. The report of the minutes have been printed, posted, and circulated. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, then the minutes will stand approved as posted. We go back to our public forum. We have 3 people that have signed to speak this evening, so we will start this evening with Mr. Chad Emmerich.
Good evening. My name is Chad Emmerich, and I am a resident of Vienna, West Virginia. This evening, I want to present a recommendation based upon the agenda item regarding the 35-cent longevity pay when hiring pre-qualified officers. Over the course of the last year, it has been brought to the attention of this council that there has been a great challenge in recruiting and retaining the highest quality of officers, not just locally, but nationally. At the last council meeting, Chief Pfeiffer presented a recommendation that would award credit for the 35-cent longevity pay up to 5 years to service qualified officers. And the mayor recommended adding an additional previous awarded vacation time as an incentive as well. Both are included in tonight's version of the resolution, and I think these are steps in the right direction. But from the viewpoint of a recruiting and retention standard, and having been a recruiting and retention officer, I believe that a much broader program that provides incentives to a wider range of officers would benefit the city. If we adopt a strong incentive program, it would allow us to retain and recruit the most qualified officers to our force. We need continued excellence in our force to provide the security to our schools and our community. These incentives, as I had figured, would roughly cost the city approximately $100 a day to provide. If you look at the handout that I provided, and I made this available previous this week, the purpose would be to provide incentives to recruit and retrain the highest quality of officers to serve within our community. This is achieved by offering incentives to both new hires and existing personnel to ensure that our police force structure maintains operational readiness within the department. Across the nation, law enforcement agencies struggle to find suitable candidates that have both the interest and willingness and meet the basic qualifications for training. More and more agencies are finding the need to seek innovative ways to aggressively recruit, train, and retain qualified personnel. To ensure that we are able to secure the highest quality of officers for our police department, I recommend the incentive program as shown below. In the way of recruiting, new hires that would be unqualified would receive a $6,000 sign-on bonus that would be split disbursement, $4,000 which would be paid at the end of the second full year of service, and $2,000 that would be paid at the end of the third year, or the end of the third year of service. New hires that are pre-qualified would receive the credit, as the mayor suggested, for previously earned vacation time up to 10 days annually, 35-cent hourly experience differential up to 5 years of continuous service. I've put a note in there as well. I would recommend 50 cents. If you look at national statistics in buying power of just a little bit more, the human mind tweaks 50 cents much differently than it does 35. On the retention side of the house, officers with between 3 to 12 years of service, a $1,500 retention bonus would be paid at the end of each credible year of service. Officers with over 12 years of service would receive a step pay at 15 years at 3% and 20 years at 3%. Just going off of a rough guesstimation of numbers, you can see what the total cost per year would be, and it breaks down to basically between $85 and $100 a day, little less than $32,000 a year to provide an incentive. For this investment, I believe that we can create stability and strength within our force and ensuring a stronger community for tomorrow. I encourage this council to do everything that it can to ensure that our police department has the resources it needs to protect us today and prepare us for tomorrow. Looking farther into the future, I would also encourage this council to support school programs that would mentor youth in becoming valuable members of our community and maybe one day become law enforcement officers themselves. Thank you for your time in this matter.
Next is Brenda Powell.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Powell. I live at 1409 31st Street here in Vienna. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I just wanted to bring up a couple things that I have been thinking about, mainly with all the businesses, the new businesses that are coming into our community. I think it's important that we look at the ordinances as far as the coding and what it entails. And I know that many council members have brought this up before about digging into the ordinances and seeing what needs to be changed or whatever. But I think the more we look at it and that businesses are coming here, there needs to be that looked at as far as the coding is concerned with new businesses that are coming in. That's just a suggestion on my part. The other thing is I wanted to bring up about the Jackson Pool. I can't help but I know that the process that has been going on and the committee being picked, but I really felt that that the community should have been more involved in it, having public meetings and let them be there to see what's being discussed and what's being talked about. I do feel that would have been an asset to the community. The way it is that I don't know. I think that Councilman Mancuso, after the matrix was done and finished, and there wasn't any type of a conflicting interest or whatever regarding it, should have been on the committee. I think he would have brought forth a really lot of assets to helping with the pool and what's transpiring with it. I really, really wish that he'd have been on the committee. It would have been a really big help, I think. Also, I just wanted to say these few things that maybe the community can, again, it's kind of after the fact because, we've already gotten to this far with the design and we don't even have cost yet available, and it's just like an unknown situation. So anyway, I hope things can maybe progress along and the public be more involved. Thank you.
Tammy Rhodes.
Good evening. My name is Tammy Rhodes, and I live at 4604 6th Avenue. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One of this is kind of a redundant conversation from last council meeting. But as we know, the Dairy Queen on Grand Central Avenue was opened prior to 1997. And 1997 was when the amended ordinances was adopted. At that time, it was zoned as R3. It stopped operating in 2019. In the city ordinances, as well as the West Virginia Code, it talks about non-conforming businesses. And what it states in the Vienna ordinances is that when a business ceases as a business and stops functioning as a business, it has 6 months to resume. If it doesn't resume in that period of time, it's supposed to revert to the use of the district in which it's located. So in reading this, and in reading what the requirements to rezone or whatever allow a conditional use, it should have gone before a public hearing as well as the planning commission. In the zoning, it does talk about the elimination of, under purposes, the elimination of non-conforming use properties, and in the C1 to protect the central business district by limiting outlying commercial districts. In that amendment, it does talk about abandonment. And this was brought up when I talked at the last council meeting. And I just want to say that it really is just about the relinquishment or the cessation of use. It doesn't have anything to do with utilities. It doesn't have anything to do with taxes, a business license, building permits, lawn service, snow removal. Those are all normal things that any business would do. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the vape shop. I think we're in need, desperate need of a vape shop ordinance that would be similar to what is done for the video lottery ordinance, where it limits the location, it limits the distance from churches, schools, and so forth. And I think that needs to be in place. My concern with both of these is I don't think we need to mix up zoning and vape shops. Zoning is an issue for the 34th Street, 3400 property. A lot of people don't like the vape shop. I don't like the vape shop. Most people don't want a vape shop in a residential area. However, I think that in talking about that and in zoning in itself, that we need to be careful that we're not being discriminative and that we're not making arbitrary decisions based on what we think is good, what we think is bad, what needs to be in a certain place, or doesn't need to be in a certain place. I think if we limit ourselves to saying, okay, this is the issue with the 3400 Grand Central Avenue property, that it needed to be reverted. And that's the issue. So what happens? Where do we go? It wasn't done correctly. With the vape shop ordinance, then you deal with the vape shops. But we're not basing a zoning decision on a judgment, because I don't think that that would hold up in court, truthfully. So I think we need to be very careful of how we word that and what we do with that. And that's all I've got to say. Oh, one other thing. We have a nice downtown. We have a nice downtown district. The C1 linear district goes all the way up to 34th Street. I think we could break out that commercial district into two, like other cities do, and bring the C1 up to a certain place, wherever that's at, 20th Street, 21st, and then the rest of it be the downtown district is zoned differently than the rest of the commercial district. That way there could be more limitations in the business district as far as the types of businesses, what's allowed, their character, how it fits in with the community, and everything else. We can't do that with all the big stores, but we can do it in our downtown district. So that's just a suggestion that I wanted to make. So thank you.
We have no unfinished business this evening, so we'll move into new business. The first item on our agenda this evening is a resolution approving an hourly wage increase and vacation time incentive for new hire police officers who are certified police officers according to the West Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Subcommittee, and rescinding the $10,000 sign-on bonus for new hire certified officers. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that all new hire police officers that are currently certified police officers as determined by the West Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Subcommittee of the Governor's Committee on Crime, Delinquency, and Corrections will be compensated an additional 35 cents per hour for every 1 year of completed service as a police officer with a qualified police agency with a maximum of 5 years. In the case of a new hire police officer that was previously employed as a police officer in another state, in order for the incentive to apply, a review of that officer's training record by the West Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Subcommittee is required to determine if said officer qualifies as certified or certifiable. In that, the officer is only required to complete an abbreviated training period to become certified in the state of West Virginia. Furthermore, this incentive will only apply to new hires that were employed as police officers at the time of hire or who had been employed as police officers within 1 year at the time of hire at the City of Vienna. New hire certified police officers, as determined above, will also be compensated 10 days of vacation as of the initial hire date, waiving the completion of 1 year anniversary rule stated in the City of Vienna Personnel Manual. At the completion of 1 year, the employer will resume vacation accrual as indicated in the Personnel Manual. The above incentive will apply only to new hire police officers and does not apply to officers who have resigned and have been rehired or reinstated as per West Virginia Code 8-14-20 or any other provision under the West Virginia Code or Municipal Code of the City of Vienna. The $10,000 sign-on bonus program for new hire police officers who were certified as police officers by the West Virginia Law Enforcement Training Committee or training equivalent as determined by the West Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Subcommittee is hereby rescinded. Before we take a vote on this, the motion and the second, I would like to clarify one item and have it added into this for clarification. The 10 days of vacation as of the initial hire date is determined to be 80 hours. All right? So that will be for your 10 days, would be 8 hours a day for 10 hours. Okay? 8 hours a day for 10 days. All right? So, all right, does everyone understand that? Mike, you want to clarify that?
Yeah, well, when we originally put that up and I had talked with Stephanie and we had 10 days vacation and the officers right now work 10-hour shifts, so it'll be 100 hours. That wasn't the intent.
All right, so that's the clarification that will be put in that, all right? All right, I'll entertain a motion for the passage of the resolution approving the hourly wage incentive and vacation time incentive for new hire police officers who are certified police officers according to the West Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Subcommittee and rescinding the $10,000 sign-on bonus for new hire certified police officers.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. Is there any further discussion?
I just have one question for clarification, Mayor, regarding the West Virginia Professional Standards and Review Committee. There was a part of that in there read something about, well, let me ask it this way. Do they have the say in approving new officers? Is that the way that works, Chief? Or?
So what that committee does, that committee West Virginia standards for police in the entire state of West Virginia. That training is based, the initial training is based on a number of hours, okay? So that's why the disparity sometimes between other states, if you come in from wherever, California, if you're several hundred hours short or whatever, it's not comparable to the state training in West Virginia. So when that does happen, often, obviously, officers would be employed in that state for some time, and you have continuing education and hours that keep accruing or accumulating, and oftentimes they will actually equal or move beyond our training. So the way that works is when an officer comes into our state that has enough hours by that committee, they put them through a retrainer just on West Virginia law, so they get sped up on our law. You just don't come in, put up your hand, drop the roll card. You don't know the law of West Virginia. So that's essentially what that
Okay,
abbreviated training that is talked about.
very good. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
I just had one quick question as well. So as far as the compensation for time off, that is regardless of how much compensation, because I know we talked at the last council that they could maybe carry over time from a previous job, but this is just 10 days flat out from the beginning.
Yes, but if the way the personnel manual now is, you would have to wait an entire year
Yeah.
before you got any vacation.
Yeah.
With this new order resolution here, they get 2 weeks to when they come.
Okay.
All right. So
Okay.
that way, when they, just because they left their old job, doesn't mean you have to wait a year to take a
Right.
break.
Okay.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the resolution approving the hourly wage and vacation pay incentive, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Chief, find us some officers, sir. Okay. Kathy, thank you. All right. I know you are. All right. Second item this evening is a resolution approving the final settlement agreements in the ongoing opioid litigation. We have settlement agreements from Janssen and Johnson & Johnson. We have settlements with Allergan, CVS, Rite Aid, and Walmart. As you know, we all of the cities participated in these lawsuits, and they have reached settlements with them. So we need to approve a resolution accepting the resolution. It's a resolution approving the final settlement agreements in the ongoing opioid litigation with Allergan, CVS, Rite Aid, Teva, and Walmart, and Janssen, Johnson & Johnson. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna upon recommendation of its Opioid Litigation Council that it hereby accepts and adopts the final settlement agreements attached hereto and incorporated by reference herein as part of the city's ongoing opioid litigation with Allergan, CVS, Rite Aid, Teva, Walmart, Janssen, and Johnson & Johnson. Council further authorizes the mayor, his agents, or designees to take any steps as are reasonable to adopt these seven settlement agreements, including the execution of any and all documents to facilitate the same. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution approving the settlement agreements in the opioid litigations.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. Is there any discussion?
Will there be any further settlements? Is it ongoing litigation?
Yeah.
So there could be, and there could not be.
Yes, we've dealt this will put, I think, we're 6 now. There are others. I don't know.
No, that's
But there are others. Yeah. Yes, there could be.
okay.
And I'll answer the second question, which I know everybody wants to know. We have no idea how much money.
Right.
They haven't settled it yet because they have to do all the final documents, but
We don't know ultimately what the dollar amount is going to be. We were
approved a settlement agreement, or I guess a memorandum of understanding. And right now, these total about roughly $410 million, but we get a small, it's all based on population and a couple of other factors, but primarily population, and we get a fraction of a percent of that. So don't get excited. And then lastly, the agreements generally are the same, but there are some differences. And when I say differences, I mean the time periods that are payouts. Johnson & Johnson, for example, it appears that it pays out their settlement agreement all at once. I think Teva will pay theirs out over a period of 15 years. The agreements are generally the same, the terms are generally the same, but there are differences. But ultimately, you're releasing claims, any future claim that the city would have as a result of litigation against these companies. So, but that said, I guess 0.23% of something is better than 100% of nothing. So, true.
Is there any further discussion? If not, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the resolution approving the final settlement agreements, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Item number 3 this evening is a resolution dedicating lands north of Jackson Park Drive Is that a cell phone? Please mute it. It's a resolution dedicating lands north of Jackson Park Drive, presently known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, for the sole purpose and use of youth soccer administered by the Vienna Recreation Improvement Association, or is assigned. The Park Board of the City of Vienna supports the plan for dedicated soccer fields as requested by Vienna Recreation Improvement Association. The land is north of Jackson Park Drive, also known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, and would be dedicated solely for soccer fields, thus securing the stability and future growth of the soccer programs. Note, fields number 1, 2, and 3 on the southern side of Jackson Park Drive will continue to be dedicated to baseball and softball and may be developed further for those programs. This resolution was dated October the 19th, 2022, and it is signed by Tim Roberts, the Park Board President.
Is that the request?
That's the request.
Yes. The request for dedicated soccer fields. The Vienna Recreation Improvement Association is requesting from the city through the Park Board that the land north of Jackson Park Drive, also known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, be dedicated solely for soccer fields, thus securing the stability and future growth of the soccer programs. Note, Fields 1, 2, and 3 on the southern side of Jackson Park Drive will continue to be dedicated to baseball and softball and may be developed further for those programs. It is dated October the 10th, 2022, and it is signed by Chuck Knopfsinger, the president of Vienna Recreation Improvement Association.
Then we need to go back to the resolution.
No.
Okay. Sorry. They're out over there. My apologies.
Can you mute that?
Haven't been able to yet.
Sheesh. Okay, here we go. The resolution. I'll find it exactly for you. How about that?
That's what I was saying. You catch it on beauty.
Oh, gosh. All right. It's the resolution dedicating lands north of Jackson Park Drive, presently known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, for the sole purpose and use of youth soccer administered by the Vienna Recreation Improvement Association or its assignee. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of this resolution dedicating lands north of Jackson Park Drive, presently known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, for the sole purpose and use of youth soccer administered by the Vienna Recreation Improvement Association or its assignees.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. Is there any discussion?
Is it used for anything else now?
Baseball fields.
So will we have adequate baseball?
Yes. I asked for those numbers from our parks director. The youth baseball, well, I don't really, Chuck, would you care to answer that question as far as numbers go on the amount of players, or will you just listen to my numbers and tell me if my numbers are correct?
Yeah.
All right, so fine. So the baseball programs that we run on those other fields will have approximately 60 players playing, Tom. But the soccer program runs in excess of 400. I believe it's 420. And so the need for soccer fields is very great. And we already have 3 other baseball fields. So with scheduling the difference, I believe that the baseball program will not suffer by this, but yet the soccer fields will grow because it appears to be the largest sport that we have in our recreation program. Good? Okay.
Well, I have some questions along that line too, because I think we all can say we support soccer, and we know that it's growing, and we need to accommodate all these kids. You know, we still support the baseball, softball, t-ball, all of that too. And it seemed like a no-brainer at first until I got an email from the parks director that kind of explained some things a little bit further. I have some concerns about, 4, 5, and 6 either being used for games or for practice fields. I know that the softball program exclusively uses 5 and 6 for practice, so I don't think it's as easy as just saying, we can just do this and everything is going to be fine. I have a lot of questions about that. I was unaware of this, that there is, and I have a question about it, that the sledding hill that we use, that there's potential significant donation to turn that into some soccer fields. And so I'd really like to learn more about that before we make a decision about committing 4, 5, and 6 just for soccer. And the other part of it is, and I guess I'm unclear why this resolution has to happen tonight, because as far as I know, there's not going to be anything going on in those fields until we get to the spring.
I'll speak to some of that. As far as the urgency goes, I'm going to kind of parallel it with what we've dealt with the pool. For years, it was like, well, what are we going to do with the baby pool? What are we going to do with the baby pool? What are we going to do with the baby pool? Well, we really need to do something with the pool. And nothing was ever done. And now here we are having to deal with kind of a monster project, right? Soccer is not a new program. It is well established. It is well attended, and they have to limit the number of players that they have because of their limit of space. Would baseball have to change some of their programming or scheduling in order to accommodate that for now? Yes. And so it is not like, oh, baseball won't be affected at all. It's fine. It's not that at all. And that side, the 1, 2, 3 side, could be further developed and have additional fields. There is room for that over there, and it can be developed over there. If we don't answer it now, it takes a good year for the grass to get going, and we're looking at having to regrade it and get it crowned and that kind of stuff. And so it's not just like, oh, well, we don't need it until the spring, so why are we deciding now? No, because these programs have a ton of volunteers, a ton of coaches. The leadership needs to know what to expect. So even if we pass this tonight, things will still pretty much be the same in the spring. Okay, we're hoping that next fall we would be able to have all of that completely dedicated to soccer. But those changes would begin happening. So spring baseball may be affected because we may be changing those fields, because we wouldn't actually be able to fully use them for just soccer for another year. So that's why we need to do it now. And honestly, I think Vienna Recreation Improvement Association has been really patient, and in some ways their patience has allowed people to take advantage of that, and their needs have been overlooked, I believe, long enough. They've been a great partner for the city. As far as the other things you're referencing to the email, it has the full backing of the park board. It is a request from Vienna Recreation Improvement Association, and that person that sent the email has not been to those meetings, and should have been and could have been. So I think we need to look at the people that are directly involved in the program and answer the call. Otherwise, that program could end up taking a hit. You're going to have tired people who are tired of trying to fit 400 people in 2 acres when they could have a great big space. We could expand the program. We could have adult leagues. You could wrap up your day and not have to play soccer all week long. You know, you could actually play the game and be done with it, or accommodate more people. So I believe the time is now, that we need to pass this, and I believe baseball deserves an upgrade also. And so this is not about competing with each other. They're already competing with each other. They're already having to share the same field. And soccer has outgrown the facilities that we have provided.
Long time ago.
Mm-hmm. So.
Right, but you didn't answer the one important thing that I needed to know,
What's that?
which the sled hill. Is there potentially a significant investment that could be made there from a foundation?
Something has been mentioned about that. However, I believe that foundation is on board with the new program. So that is not necessarily, I don't think we need to look at the sled hill, because again, that is way far away. Like we talked about all kinds of possibilities. I mean, we looked at all kinds of flat spaces around the city. We looked at 12th Street, looked at Spencer's Landing, looked at even the Manville property, looked at, off of 46th Street. But those were like, oh, well, that's a great 10-year plan, or that's a great 5-year plan. We're already saying if we act now, it's going to be another year before we get to use it. And that is not going to be a fast project. We can do something about it right now and not have to disturb Sled Ride Hill, and still be able to create a great space for baseball. It's not necessary to disturb everything else just because baseball, and I'm a baseball mom, right? I've spent a lot of hours down there. So this is not about that. This is about, we need to, as a city and as organizations, we need to look at what do we do really well. Let's keep doing that well. If there are areas that are not, or they're kind of peripheral and they're not as successful, then maybe we trim it and refocus our efforts and do even better at the stuff we're doing well. And maybe that is what baseball needs to do. But regardless, this is not a conversation about baseball. This is a conversation about the fact that Vienna Recreation Improvement Association has an incredibly successful soccer program, and they are getting moved back and forth, and having to compete with that many people. It'd be one thing if you were having to shuffle 60 people around. They're shuffling over 400. And that is a frustrating logistical nightmare. And we owe the community better than that. I mean, we probably have kids from other zip codes, but a huge majority of them are here from Vienna. These are Vienna kids and Vienna families. And I 100% believe that we need to provide the soccer fields now.
In addition to that, Melissa, you talked about these other kids from other areas. I have always been, and it always concerned me that And when we experienced this in baseball, huge a few years back, and have pretty much resolved it. But I don't want to lose Vienna kids and Vienna volunteers and Vienna parents to other areas because of logistic problems. And believe me, I know you can spend every night of the week out there. I've done it, and and you do it because you want to do it. But the point is, we need to keep these people in Vienna. And, I don't want to lose them because of logistical scheduling issues and changing of schedules and, reschedules at the last minute. And, that's what caused the almost complete and total failure of our baseball program a few years back. And Randy, I know you remember it. It was no fun, was it?
No.
So, we certainly don't want to do that. And soccer is going to continue to grow. We know that, without a doubt. It's going to continue to grow, and we need to grow with it. And we've talked about it for a long time. And I just think it's time that we take some action. We do something. Let's get something going. Let's get this, And, that don't have to be a dead end for the soccer projects either. I mean, they can continue to be evaluated and looked at down the road, down the road and, in their future, there very well may be a better plan and a better design. But I don't see it for right now, but.
We have to keep adapting to what is relevant to our culture at the time. And so, yeah, I agree. There may be a time, 10, 15 years from now when we get a piece of property and we get a hunk of money and we're able to build the super duper complex that answers all their problems, and that would be awesome. I also wanted to mention one more thing. So the foundation that you were referring to, I know that they're not, it's not just tied to Sleigh Ride Hill. That was something that was thrown out like, well, hey, what about that space? But because of this other good option, the money's not only tied to that location. The money was tied to improving soccer for the youth. That's what the money is tied to. It's not attached to a piece of property. So if we have a good solution, that money will be there.
The one thing I'd like to clarify on that, if I might, we have the only lighted sleigh riding hill anywhere around here, anywhere. The money that was provided to build that, to light it, was provided by a foundation. I would not be in favor of taking one foundation's donation to the betterment of the city in favor of another foundation wanting to come in and redo that. We respect our foundations. We're grateful for the money they provide for us, but we also have to be respectful. Okay? So the sleigh riding hill is a tremendous asset. If it's well used when we get snow, so it's a great asset for us. But at any rate, is there any further discussion?
I mean, just really quickly, I appreciate that. And I'm not anti-soccer. That's not what I'm saying at all. And I can totally appreciate what Mrs. Elam has said and what Mr. Bibby has said regarding not wearing down your volunteers. And, that's very important. Anybody who's been involved in any nonprofit knows, I mean, we struggle for volunteers and capacity and all that stuff. But on the same token, I think there was a number thrown around that spring and summer baseball, softball programs, there were about 340 kids, and then we're at 420 kids for the soccer. So while, yes, soccer overwhelms in numbers, but I don't want to see us create another problem, the law on unintended consequences, for the folks that are involved in the baseball, softball, and all that stuff. That's why I just had a lot of questions about that. For me personally, I would like to, number one, hear from the parks director, and I know he's not here tonight because he does football, and we all know that, why this couldn't wait until football season was over another week or so that we could have had a better discussion about that. And while I appreciate what the mayor has just said about the foundation and the lights and sled riding hill, I think maybe that's something that can be overcome too, because we do not, sled riding, if we're fortunate, maybe it happens twice a year, and when it does, it's fabulous, and all the kids have a good time, and I enjoyed looking at those pictures probably more than anybody. But if that's a solution to some of our, being able to expand our soccer programs, I mean, I think, this is a push and pull situation, right? We're going to have to make some compromises. And so for me, I'm not real comfortable with doing it tonight. Just to have that resolution done tonight, I would rather wait. But I'm probably the lone person on that. So
What's the harm in waiting 2 weeks? They will wait a couple of weeks. Get everybody on the same page.
What else do you need to know? I mean, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just asking, what else would you like to know? What else would you like to know? What other questions? Because we have the park board president, we have VRI president here.
There's obviously conflict with the parks director, what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks, I don't think make that much difference.
Tom, if I can answer that question for you. I've had extensive conversations with Steve Black, our parks director, and with the Vienna Rec and the park board people about this subject. 2 weeks is not going to make a bit of difference. I hate to say that, but we've been through this so many times that it is just not, it's just 2 weeks is not going to make any difference. And I say that honestly, okay? All right? Steve knew this meeting was here tonight. He made his feelings very well known, but I also support changing the baseball fields to soccer, simply because we have the best tennis courts around. We have the best pickleball courts around. We have the best baseball fields, lighted baseball fields, and we are lacking severely in our soccer program. I think that the soccer program deserves to have that additional space so they can develop this, and it'll be made into a first-class facility. It just will. That's the way we do things. All right? And I would hate to see us delay this. I personally, after all the discussions and meetings, I'm ready to move forward. So, but you're welcome to do whatever you want. And if everybody feels that way, then that's the way we'll do it. Okay?
well,
If there's no more discussion,
I'd like to make the motion to table until the next council meeting.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded that we table this to the next council meeting. All in favor of tabling, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, is there any further discussion?
Motion carried.
No, it was denied.
Well, no, I mean, it failed,
2-4.
thank you.
Yeah, failed, yeah.
It failed 2-4. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, I just have like one quick comment on this. When I'm looking at this, I look at the Parks Master Plan that we've spent a lot of money on, and it's very clear that there's a need for soccer fields. And I don't want to ignore that. But I do want to be very careful if we do kind of move forward with this, in that we don't just pass this resolution and then don't talk about it anymore. Because it does take time to do the work to make soccer fields down there. And I would hate for us to get around to this time next year and it look the exact same as it does now. So, if we're going to do this, then let's do it and make sure something actually happens so that it can truly benefit the whole community. And those are just my 2 comments.
And I agree with Chris, 100%. As I said there a little bit ago, it's something we've talked about forever and ever and ever. And, there's, not been any resolutions to it. And now we have VRIA and we have the park board who, is coming forth with here's what we've agreed on. Here's what we want to do. And so, they've been productive in in their work, and progressive. And I think we need to do that as well. And like Chris said, but you can't stop here tonight.
Tim, I know that you've been involved in this whole process. Is there any doubt in your mind that you all and the soccer people will not have a plan ready very soon? I know that. Yeah, I think you fellows will see, you'll see something happen quickly. All right. All right. All right. Then I'll call for the question. I'll read the resolution dedicating lands north of Jackson Park Drive, presently known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, for the sole purpose and use of youth soccer administered by the Vienna Recreation Improvement Association or its assignees. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna, based upon the request by the Vienna Recreation Improvement Association and upon recommendation of the Park Board of the City of Vienna, in order to secure the stability and future growth for youth soccer in the City of Vienna, that it hereby dedicates those certain fields located north of Jackson Park Drive, presently known as Fields 4, 5, and 6, exclusively for the youth soccer program presently administered by the Vienna Recreation Improvement Association or any other entity assigned by the city in the future to implement and administer a youth soccer program. All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the next item on our agenda this evening is a resolution renaming the areas containing fields 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of Jackson Park as the Darrell Dotson Sports Complex. Council accepts the design, location, and placement of a sign reflecting the same. Council accepts any and all of the donations previously offered and collected to defer the cost of the design, location, and construction of the sign. I have letters here signed by both the Park Board and Vienna Recreation endorsing this. This was brought to me by members of the Park Board. That is what the archway will look like. I met with the Department of Highways. They have designated the spot because Park Drive is a state highway. And so when you come in off Rosemar Road, you see the entrance signs that welcome you to Jackson Park. There are stone pillars with wooden placards on them. Right behind them is the location they have said is the safest location to put this. And so this is a rendition that was given to us by the builders to construct this. And so what they're asking for is simply permission to name the baseball fields in that area in honor of Darrell Dotson. For any of you that aren't familiar with who Darrell Dotson was, Darrell was the driving force behind Jackson Park for many, many years. He spent most of his life down there, to be honest. And unfortunately, as we're all getting older, we're probably one generation from people that have never heard of Darrell Dotson. And so to honor him with this, in my opinion, is very good. And they've raised a tremendous amount of money through donations to support this. There will be no ask for a budget revision or anything to fund this. And so this is what they're asking for. And the total cost of the project was estimated at $7,500. But I have to go back to the welders that are going to actually build this to make sure that there wasn't an increase in cost for the steel or anything else. But whatever that is, I'm sure that we can take care of that. So there will not be any budget revisions or anything for the cost of this.
Is that lighted, Mayor?
No, it is not.
It's not lighted.
Yeah, at this point, it's not. When you come in off Rosemar Road, there's a lot of light right there.
Right.
Once it's built, if it's determined that, you can stand a little, you see, do that.
I have one other question on that. Material is just going to be like a steel
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And, as I said, I did work with the Department of Highways. They have designated that there's certain height and certain width requirements in order to clear any tractor trailers or anything that would come through. It's, just pretty much, they've done all the other ones in town. They did the Market Street, what's it called? Juliana Street, the archways there. They're just, these will look professional. They're to look perfect, to be honest. So, anyway. The resolution renaming the area containing fields 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of Jackson Park as the Darrell Dotson Sports Complex. Council accepts the design, location, and placement of a sign reflecting the same. Council accepts any and all of the donations previously offered and collected to defer the cost of the design, location, and construction of the sign. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that it hereby renames those areas of Jackson Park containing what is commonly referred to as fields 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and its curtilage as the Darrell Dotson Sports Complex. Council approves the design, location, and placement of a sign reflecting the same. Council further accepts any and all donations previously offered to defer the cost of design, location, and construction of the same. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution renaming the area containing fields 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and naming it the Darrell Dotson Sports Complex.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to say something real quick. I'm normally not for naming things after folks, but Darrell was an icon, and I was one of the kids that was. He changed my life. Him and Randall Roberts. My dad. I learned how to play sports right here in Vienna, so I think I turned out okay. So.
Is there any further discussion?
He was a dad.
You never had to doubt where you were standing, did you, Tom?
No, you didn't.
All right. All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
He was always nice to me.
Oh, me too. He loved the kids. My gosh, he spent his whole life here. Item number 5 this evening is a discussion on the zoning and sale of 3400 Grand Central Avenue. I did not ask for this, so I have no comments.
Well, I asked for it. So
Okay.
if I need to go first, that's fine. We would like to know how this happened.
Who is we?
Me, I've reached out to the city attorney. I haven't heard back yet. I've talked to Kevin on the phone, Kevin Parrish, and I don't understand why this didn't go back to the planning commission, why there wasn't a public hearing, how this was able to be kept as a commercial property when, according to my understanding of the ordinances, it would have reverted from commercial back to residential, particularly in R3, after the property didn't sell within a year.
Mr. Skogstad, yes, sir. We would like you to respond.
All right. I actually have gone through this because I was curious, and the last time this came up at council, I didn't have enough information to speak. Anyway, I checked with Dwayne and Kevin. Dwayne has been our, I guess, code enforcement official, and one of his job duties is to do just this, is to encourage or at least not allow the government to get in the way of commercial development. So when I talked to Dwayne, he explained to me for the last 27 years, he's attempted or enforced the non-conforming structures ordinance in a way that he feels, and it appears to, and has proven to be a good system. That is, he's given businesses the opportunity to develop property without creating waste and with the attempt of not incurring liability on the city. A lot of the one of the reasons that he interpreted this ordinance the way that he does and that he's interpreted it in the past is he's taken into consideration, amongst other things, the length of time that property goes on tax sales. Now, that certainly didn't apply in this case, but that's one example. If you buy property on tax sale, it can take 15 months for the person who bought a parcel of property to get an actual deed. You have a period of, you have the actual time period that the property has to go unpaid. You have an amount of time that a person is allowed to redeem the property. So, but anyway, so let's just talk specifically about this case. So what I looked at, the facts as I understand it were that Dairy Queen closed, the utilities were left on, the property was maintained, taxes were paid, and it was marketed and as a commercial enterprise. I went back and actually searched for it to see how it was marketed, and I found it listed with several realtor websites and what have you, where it was marketed as a commercial property. Ultimately, the property, as I understand it, was sold on March 10, 2022. West Virginia Code 8A710 deals with abandonment. It specifies the definition. It's one of those definitions, and this is the same with our ordinances, that leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Some people think that is, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation, so that leaves a lot of room for people to exact their judgment and implement a policy. The policy in the city of Vienna, as I understand it, has been to be business friendly. So the state code says if a use of a property that does not conform to the zoning ordinance has ceased and the property has been vacant for 1 year, abandonment will be presumed unless the owner of the property can show that the property has not been abandoned. And then that's part of the statute further goes on and doesn't really apply here, but it deals with agricultural, industrial, manufacturing properties and how abandonment doesn't apply. 13305 of the Vienna Municipal Code, uses of structures. It's a lawful use of a structure for it to remain of a structure that exists at the effective date of the adoption of the amendment, as this case or this business did, that would not be allowed in the district under the terms of this ordinance. The lawful use may be continued so long as it remains otherwise lawful, subject to the following provisions. So basically, that paragraph creates the grandfather clause. It said we had zoning, we passed zoning in 97. If you had a business that was in what would now be a residential zone, you get to continue to operate as a business so long as the business isn't abandoned. It sets out a couple of things in the following paragraphs, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And I asked questions of both Mr. Flutie and of Mr. Parrish about this, so I had the factual information as it is. Paragraph A, no existing structure that has a conditional use that is can be enlarged, extended, constructed, reconstructed, moved, or structurally altered. Meaning, if you've got a building and it has a footprint, you can't make it bigger, can't tear it down. If you do, that's considered abandonment. Footprint of this building hasn't been changed. There was a minor remodel permit that was issued, a sign permit that was placed out front, but the permit, neither the sign permit nor the remodeling permit allows for the alteration of the structure itself. So we got a paragraph B. Any non-conforming use may be extended throughout any part of a building which were manifestly arranged or designed for such use at the time of the adoption of the amendment of this ordinance. No such use shall be extended to occupy any lands outside the building. As we stated before, they got a minor remodel permit and a permit for the sign. So they're not increasing the footprint, square footage, or anything else of the structure itself. So we go to paragraph C. If there are no structural alterations made, any non-conforming use of a structure may be changed to another non-conforming use, provided that the Board of Zoning Appeals, either by rule or what have you. Basically, all that stands for is if you're not changing it, if you're not changing the structure, you can continue the non-conforming use unless you're making a change to the business itself that is, as long as it's equally appropriate or more appropriate to the district than the non-conforming use. So if you want to make a change and it's better for the district that it's in, you can. You have to get the Board of Zoning Appeals permission to do that. That didn't happen here. The building is retaining its commercial use. So then you look at the structure itself, and paragraph D talks about whether or not there are any intervening or superseding uses. Here, there were no intervening or superseding uses. The business remained a commercial business. They didn't turn it residential. They didn't turn it into, change the size of the building or have different occupants in it or what have you. That was different than what the commercial use was. In fact, there were none. So then you have to look at paragraph E, and that's where we get to the abandonment. Whenever, and our ordinance is a little different than state code, it says when you have a non-conforming use and that use is discontinued or abandoned for a period of 6 consecutive months or for 18 months during a 3-year period, the structure cannot be used except in conformance with the regulations of the district. So that if you change it, and our ordinance says 6 months consecutively or 18 months in a 3-year period, you lose your grandfather privilege. And we'll get back to that in a second. So, and then if you tear the building down itself, that's paragraph F. You're not allowed to build a building back, even if it's exactly the same looking building. You've lost your privilege. You've abandoned it. Here, the structure has not been removed. So, so that our code enforcement officials looked at the building, determined that the intent of the owner was to continue to market, to use the building as a commercial business, continued to maintain the building, continued to have the utilities in the building, marketed the structure and the property as a commercial property, and then ultimately sold the property to a new commercial occupant.
So it's currently still under the ownership of the previous?
No, my understanding is it was sold to a new owner March 10th. Yeah. Yes. All right. But they haven't made it. Look, the bottom line is all of our ordinances that would normally you would look at to say a building is abandoned, with the exception of the time period, there's no question that it meets, right? It's not been changed. There's not been any intervening tenants. It's not been made a residential building or something, and then tried to turn back into a commercial building. So the only thing at issue here is whether the time period meets for the abandonment. I think our ordinance is, there's an argument that could be made that it's in conflict with state code because our ordinance says 6 months, state code says a year. Generally, whenever you have a conflict between state and municipal law, the state law holds out. So there's a question, well, let me get to the point. The policy has been to be business friendly. We had property at I think Woodridge was one of the places. We haven't had very many non-conforming uses that come up. The clearest example is the property up on 60th Street that used to be, or near 60th Street that used to be the grocery store. We had Matlack's Grocery on the corner of 7th and 41st Street, and we had a grocery store at the corner of 10th and 34th. Those properties were all clearly abandoned. The property owner that bought Matlack's basically lives in front of it, turned it into his own little museum for Harley Davidson. And that property can't be turned back into a commercial building unless it goes before the planning commission. The planning commission says okay, because he stopped using it for a commercial purpose. The grocery store at 10th and 34th, same thing. Property owner bought it, used it for personal storage. He did all the things that they've done with this property, kept the building, maintained it, and so forth. But he changed its use. Right, he's using it for personal storage, so that is an abandonment example. The Woodridge property is the only other one that, Dwayne, because I asked if we could find specific examples, because I want to make sure everybody's being treated the same. Woodridge property, it was initially an elder care home that was abandoned. I think it was purchased off of a tax sale. That property was subdivided and turned into 4 residential lots, as I understand it. And that's an example of a property where the original commercial use or its grandfathered use has been abandoned. And now it falls under the zoning, and they wouldn't be able to bring that property back as commercial property. So the question here is all on interpretation of abandonment as a result of time. So Mr. Flutie has done as he's done for the last 27 years, and I think it's completely reasonable. And the reason I think it's reasonable is property has been maintained, the utilities have been on, it was marketed as a commercial structure. It was not on the market for an unreasonable or unexpected amount of time. It was the intent of the property owners to continue to use the property as a commercial property. There are concerns that I have for council to direct the city to do otherwise. One of those concerns is the remedy. If somehow, through whatever mechanism we ultimately chose, the city denied the status, their commercial status, and forced the property to revert to an R2 zone. Property owner has a couple of different remedies, the first of which would be to file an injunction against the city and say, no, this is a takings. You're taking my property from me, the use of the property as a commercial property from me. You do not have a reasonable or rational basis in doing so. File a writ of mandamus saying, one, the property can return or retain its commercial zoning status, continue in its non-conforming use, and allow it to continue to operate as a business. They could assert and ask the court, if they're not given that remedy, if the city denies them the remedy, they could ask for damages. Damages would be the value of the building as a correct residential building versus a commercial property. I'm not an appraiser. I don't know what that number would be. I would assume, based on, based on being a grown-up, that commercial property in the city of Vienna has a higher value at that location than a house would have, because that property, I think, sold for, I want to say, about $270,000. And I guess it would depend on the house that you put in there. So they could ask for damages in the diminution of value by recategorizing the property. They would make the same arguments that I have laid out to council. That they would say, we kept the property on, we marketed it, we had every intent to do it. The city has not notified us until after we had purchased the property that they intended to stop us from using it as a commercial property. That's where we're at. So the decision that was made has been consistent with the other decisions for other non-conforming properties throughout the city. There's a rational basis for it in that, as I've stated, they've marketed the property, maintained the property, kept the utilities on, and had the intent for it to operate or continue to operate even under new ownership as a commercial business. They've not violated any of the other terms of our ordinances. They've not changed the structure. They've not had intervening occupants changing the nature of the property from commercial to residential or to something else. So they meet all of our ordinances, all the parts of our ordinances with the exception of abandonment. At this point, we've never pursued abandonment as an issue against other properties in the city. We've let the business owners, if they want to use the property to run a business, so long as they continue to do so, we let them have, successive business owners have that opportunity. But if that's the will of council to direct somebody at some point to take a different action, that's certainly the thing. That's certainly something that council could consider, but understand the arguments, the reasons that I'm putting out are the arguments that you're going to have to deal with in court. The last thing, one more thing, the individual that was operating the business as a Dairy Queen said that he had a number of people wanting to use the building as a commercial property. But if you've ever owned commercial property, run a business, it doesn't happen overnight. And if you go with our 6-month time frame, particularly with all of the things that have been happening in the economy in the last 3 years, you may have some difficulty. That may not be the only property that could be affected by the abandonment issue. The last thing council wanted to know, I think one of the questions was, why were we not told what business is going to go into the property? One of the code enforcement's duties is to not interfere with property owners finding occupants for their property. So our code enforcement has, I don't want to say taken it upon themselves, but it is it's an important part of their job that what they know remain confidential. For a number of reasons. Code enforcement officer goes out and says, hey, there's a business going into this lot, and you may run a competing type business. You may try to come in and buy that lot, so this competing business doesn't come in. There may be issues with financing that have to be considered. There's any number of reasons that our officials have to remain confidential as to that issue. So council is not going to know. And I think that that's a sound and reasonable policy that prevents business owners from having opportunities taken from them because somebody said something out of turn. And so I guess that's the answer. I looked at it. I listened to the facts. I looked at the ordinances. I think the interpretation that code enforcement made was a reasonable interpretation.
Okay, I have a quick question then about the language.
Okay.
Okay, and so I'm just going to refer you right now to 133.05E,
Okay.
because you went through all of those.
I did.
And I'm going to read it. When a non-conforming use of a structure or structure and premises in combination is discontinued or abandoned. It was discontinued. There was no business in operation there. I mean, I can understand what you're saying about abandonment, but there seems to be, that's not the only criteria. And if I look back to the state code, 1-2, it's very similar language in that sense, because it also says, or resuming the non-conforming use of the property.
Well, that's the thing, is I actually went through and was trying to find case law that applied to this too, and there's surprisingly a lack of it. It really depends on how you want to interpret your own ordinances as far as discontinued or abandoned. If you want discontinued or abandoned, if you want to be very specific, I don't know, let's say that the Vitrolite hardware store down there is still open and it's still Vitrolite hardware. And you want to read it discontinued very, very stringently. Ace Hardware comes in and buys it, right? You say, whoa, 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 whoa. You discontinued your use of the property as Ace Hardware, and that's how we interpret our ordinance to be. So the commercial property is no longer, once you sold to Ace, you lose, you can't do it. You've discontinued the business. Or if you want to interpret it a little more broadly than that, you could say Vitrolite Hardware, say they want to put a ladies' clothing shop in or a men's clothing shop in. So you have a commercial property, Ace Hardware sells it, and say the very next day, Ace Hardware goes out, they load up all their stuff in the middle of the night. The very next day, this guy's very efficient. He brings in whatever, men suits and dresses and what have you, and opens up shop. You could say, hold on. We actually are reading it to not just be a brand of business or the name of a business, but actually a kind of business. We're okay with hardware stores being here, but we're not okay with clothing stores being here. And you can read discontinued that way. There's not a definition of discontinued. Our statute is left, or ordinance is left to be somewhat broad and flexible. It is discontinued. Is there a definition of discontinued? It's open to interpretation. I can discontinue this conversation now by stopping talking.
Well, I actually wish that you would have interpreted this instead of the building, whether Kevin or Doug or Mr. Flutie. We're in a whole different kettle of fish now, because this did not get interpreted by you first, didn't go through any procedure whatsoever, and these are all outlined in the code. I mean, you could read it. I mean, I think we're trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole now. I could go back to 1322.01 and the purpose of the whole ordinance when they made these amendments in 97, whoever was on council then, and for whatever reasons they did it, where they said, hey, we're going to make these amendments and you're going to have these non-conforming uses, okay? But we don't want those to survive. So the idea is when businesses, things change, and gradually those things will just weed out. And this was the opportunity to look at that. And if we would have followed the ordinances, there would have been a proper procedure to go through that. And I do have an issue with the fact, non-conforming use, this is in an R3, residential 3, that has limited conditional uses. None of those uses are for retail or for a restaurant, okay? They're just not. And so you've gone from a restaurant situation into a retail situation, and nobody had a conversation about it. And I can appreciate being pro-business. I own a business right here in Vienna, and I'm pro-business as well. But I also have to think about the people that live in that neighborhood. And I have to agree with what Tammy said about, I don't want to get caught up on what kind of business it is. I think that's irrelevant. But it changed completely from a restaurant to a retail business, and it should have gone through a proper procedure. And somebody who was not the city attorney, not the planning commission, not the building, not the BZA, it never went to any of those folks.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So are you saying, I'm trying to simplify it further into my mind. Are you saying, so you have an owner, like you were talking about the Vitrolite or whatever, but in this case it's Dairy Queen. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that the owners are almost essentially stuck with it because they can't sell it. Are we saying that they can't sell it? Like you were saying, like, well, as soon as you sell it, then you've abandoned it or you've discontinued your business. So are you saying that would be kind of the situation of discontinuing, it's like, oh, so now we're telling owners, well, then you have to stay in business, or as soon as you go out of business, or as soon as you decide to relocate, then you're stuck.
Well, I mean,
Is the onus on the owner? And is it essentially we're saying you're forfeiting your property? Okay, you've decided to relocate, and now you're forfeiting your property. Is that the sticky situation you're saying we could be in?
It can have that effect. All right. Yes, it can have that effect. Essentially, what you're saying is, I own a piece of commercial property. If I don't continue to operate as a commercial property for a period under West Virginia Code, it's at least a year. Under our ordinance, which I think can go longer, but I don't know that it can go shorter. At least that's the argument that I would anticipate having to deal with. So if you have a commercial property and you own it for a period of a year, or I'm sorry, you stop using it for a period of a year. So Dairy Queen goes out of business for a year. The presumption is that you've abandoned the property, right? And unless you can then show that you didn't intend to. So if I own the property and I wanted to move up the street just like Dairy Queen did, if I retain that property, the original parcel, and I don't do anything with it, I can potentially lose the value, assuming there's a difference in value between a commercial parcel and a residential parcel, right? So that's a loss that you have to look at taking. Some people don't have a problem with taking that. Some people just do it as a cost of business, and we're growing, and we can't use it anymore. We'll sell it and do whatever we can to get out of it. But yes, that's one of the, I hope I'm saying that clearly. Yeah, if you abandon the property, you could lose the value of the difference of the property as a zoned one way versus another. And
Okay, so Tom wanted to say something.
Yeah, I've dabbled in real estate almost all my life in a very, very small way. But as long as he had the utilities on, I can't say that he abandoned it. You see a car on the side of the road and it's been abandoned. Nobody goes near it, but he's obviously looking after his building by heating it, cooling it, and whatever. In the strictest sense of the word, I think if you have a restaurant, you're retailing food. People come in, they sit down, they eat it and leave, or they even come in and take out, which is definitely retailing. And I think when they had the Dairy Queen there, if you called and wanted a chocolate ice cream cake for Joe's birthday, you go in and pick it up as you would any retail establishment. Furthermore, from a practical matter, the guy bought the thing thinking he could rent it. He didn't buy it to sit and look at. A lost day's rent's never recovered, like lost time's never found. So I can't see having any idea of punishing the guy because he can't rent his building.
So I guess I'd like to summarize this. All right, Kim, hopefully you'll understand this. All right. In Russ's explanation, he went into the fact about interpretation. Based on the way the law is written and our ordinances are written and state code is written, there's a lot of interpretation that can be done there. All right? And so when this gentleman bought this piece of property and this whole situation developed, in my opinion, based on the interpretation that code enforcement, our attorney, all of the other things that are involved, that business was never abandoned. I had no idea what was coming. I just knew it was sold. All right. He paid the utilities clear up until March of this year. He sold it in March of this year. And the fact is, because there is subject to interpretation, relying on 27 years of code enforcement operation, the decision was made that it was a legitimate business that was grandfathered in. Now, I understand that if you or any member of council wants to tighten up the rules that say no ifs, ands, or buts, if it sits vacant for 6 months, it's abandoned. That's what we change in the ordinance. Our ordinance is not written that way. There are other factors to be considered. Myself personally, he paid the utilities. He kept it in good shape. It was never abandoned. You know, it's not like Tom was saying, if you find a car along the road with the wheels off of it and the license plate's gone, you can pretty much figure that one's abandoned. This one was fine. So based on the information, based on the condition that the building was in, based on the actions that were taken, as our ordinance is written today, I believe it was a legitimate decision, and that's all I have to say about that. If you don't like it, then the ordinance can be changed.
And that's one of the things I was going to suggest is putting a mechanism in place. One of the things is, you know, whenever somebody comes in to get a building permit, they would have to show something. They would have to have notice that the property has been vacant, because there's a difference between vacant and abandoned, and sometimes we convolute those two things. But the presumption there's a presumption there. But the problem is, I don't know always that property owners know that the presumption's there. So you come in and get a building permit, or you know, there has to be some way to notify the these vacant properties that they run the risk of falling foul of our abandonment ordinance. So I would, if we're going to make a change, I would suggest that. It's the same thing with a business license, you know. But anyway, but primarily it's the building permit. But we could do the same thing with a business license. Sometimes people start to get their business license before they get their remodeling permits and vice versa. Business license, building permits, I would recommend changing the time period from 6 months to a year. I think the state, I understand what the intent was, and I haven't looked to see when West Virginia Code was amended, whether it was after 1997, if at all. It was just not a thing that had concerned me at that point. But I think it needs to be, that 12-month number would need to be, is a more appropriate number. I think it falls in line with statute. The last thing I would ask you to consider, if you're going to consider proposing legislation to change this, have clearer definitions of what constitutes abandonment and what doesn't. But also consider that things like if having the utilities on, having the heat on, maintaining the property, and marketing a vacant building isn't enough, you could negatively impact property owners who lease their property to businesses but aren't able to fill those businesses. Right now, everybody's expecting the economy. I mean, we're 8.5% inflation right now. There's not a lot of business expansion going to be going on. But you have to consider how that could negatively affect business owners who are going to have trouble getting their tenants in, and the potential effect on the retail real estate businesses that we already have, the mall, for example. Do we need to carve out an exception for them because they have businesses, they have areas of their business, and that necessarily doesn't apply to them. They're clearly in a commercial zone, but there aren't that many businesses this will apply to. But you have to consider what you're doing, and also consider some other things. The tax thing is a great example. You have a business that goes out of business, they can't pay their taxes anymore, it goes up for a tax sale. You buy it with a tax sale, it does take you about 15 months to go through that whole process. It takes you, the The taxes have to go unpaid for a year. You've got about a 90-day redemption period. After the redemption period passed, that's when you can get the deed. So you could have a business that goes out of business. You could have a perfectly usable piece of commercial property that's been used that way for years, that's inside of a R1, R2, R3 district, that would lose its grandfather status, and could lose a significant amount of value based on location. So I mean, I'm not here, and I always respect Miss Williams. Miss Williams is very articulate and makes very good points, and I'm not here to argue with that today. And I'm not here to argue with Miss Williams. I'm not here to argue with anybody else. The position I'm taking is I've reviewed our municipal code. I've reviewed state statute. I've talked to code enforcement about why they made the decision that they made, compared that with the ordinances that we have as we have them. I don't care what the business is at this point that is going in there. And just looking at solely as retaining its commercial value, it's my opinion that that the decision that was made was in conformity, was a reasonable interpretation of our ordinances, state statute, and so forth, based on the information that we have. If we want to change that because to avoid this issue in the future, I would recommend tightening up our definitions. But in tightening up our definitions, I would also want you to consider how that could negatively impact other properties that have their grandfather status. So
Could positively impact other properties as well. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, gee whiz, I know places that are open every day, and as far as I'm concerned, they've abandoned their property. So it's how you look at it. It's very interpretive.
Tom?
Just a comment. To force that guy to transform that business into individual housing or whatever would be a travesty, and it wouldn't help our image as a business-friendly community. It would just, the guy wants to rent it, I'm sure.
I also believe before I paid $275,000 for something, I'd make sure all this was worked out prior. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, maybe he had a deal, thought he had a deal, and didn't come through right there.
I have a comment just about the ordinance and the suggestion.
Okay, so if we're going to continue with this discussion, then I'm going to ask to take a 5-minute break. All right? And then
It's
we'll
a real
rejoin.
quick comment, Mayor.
Well, please continue then.
Thank you. It was a great suggestion about updating our ordinances, and I think everybody up here agrees with that. We've all talked about this a million times. I don't think this ordinance is really as loosey-goosey on the interpretation. I think it's pretty clear, but regardless, my question is, or my comment rather, you can write all the ordinances you like to write. If you don't follow them, they don't do any good, and that's what happened in this case.
Any other comments? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Please take the time to review all of the pictures that are up front. As soon as we get back, we're going to start in with the pool, and hopefully Ms. Elam will take us through that. All right?